Two. All right. I think we're good to go. We're all set up here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's installment of Succession Matters, a platform by which we hope to shed light on the various topics of succession by speaking with professionals from all walks. My name is Chelsea Lees. I'm going to be acting as your host, and today we are focusing on something a little bit different, the succession matching Ukrainian project. And I have here with me Alison Anderson, who pretty much needs no introduction when it comes to succession matching, but I'll introduce you in a second. Anyways, for those of you who are not familiar with succession matching, we're a two-sided marketplace for matching business sellers and buyers, and so much more than just that, but that is sort of our underlying descriptor. And Alison Anderson is our founder and CEO. And she has a pretty cool mission for having started the business. And I don't know if you want to just start off by speaking a little bit to that, Alison, and then we'll get going on the Ukrainian project, which is really what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chelsea. Always like watching you interview people. And so it's neat to be on the other side of the table. But as you were mentioning, we have a mission at Succession Matching. In my own personal reason I get out of bed every morning is we want to change the way that people get into business. Not every entrepreneur needs to start a business. As a startup founder myself, it really resonates with the highs and lows of starting a business. And there's just a different way that mitigates a lot of risk, and that's buying a business. So yeah, on that mission to change the way that employees or third parties purchase the businesses.
Amazing. And just to set the stage, you have a Ukrainian heritage, correct?
That's correct. I, like many Canadians, I think I saw a stat, something like 1.4 million Canadians identify as being of some sort of Ukrainian heritage. And growing up in Saskatchewan, I thought it was always funny. The first time I went to a bar outside of Saskatchewan in Alberta with my husband, I was really confused because there weren't pierogies on the appetizer menu. And he informed me that no, apparently that's not an appetizer in every other province. But yeah, very proud of growing up doing Ukrainian dancing, and my mom's bilingual, and some of my family's right from the Ukraine. So
yeah. I think one of the first things I learned about you, like outside of work stuff, outside of business stuff, was that you love to make pierogies, and you would share these videos, time lapses of you with friends, just like making pierogies on the weekend, which is such a labor intensive process. Not that we're distilling Ukrainian culture to just pierogies, but I think it is important to note that there is a strong community within Canada already of Ukrainians, which sort of brings us to what we're here to talk about today, which is the Ukrainian project that we've come up with. And it's got lots of different titles. I'm not sure what the current title is that we're going with, so I'm just like blanket calling it the Ukrainian project. But I remember, I think it was in March that you came to me, and it was like just after the war started, and you're like, we have to help with this. And you brought up some really good points. We were already working and had been working with international buyers of businesses for a number of years. We're fortunate to work with like Fragaman, if it's okay for me to mention Fragaman, to help bring individuals into the country. And I was lucky enough to work on a few of those cases where immigrants were coming in and purchasing businesses and then settling and starting up a new life. So the idea of turning the focus towards Ukrainians who were being displaced because of the war was a really interesting one. And I think we both at the time were like, hopefully this war won't go past like a few weeks, right? And unfortunately we're still in it. And where are we? We're in July, which is terrible. So what was sort of your first thoughts, Alison, in wanting to create a project other than we just need to help? Like, where did you start to see the puzzle pieces fall into place?
That's a really interesting question. I think it was happenstance. I think like many Canadians or many international people, just sitting back and thinking about how can we individually help individuals that are being displaced. And I think by happenstance, like you mentioned, our network, love working with Fragoman, but have also done a number of presentations at the Conference Board of Canada on how do we match business succession with international buyers. So having those provincial contacts and some of the federal contacts at the IRCC, and knowing that there's a real need for it. So there's a lot of sellers that feel motivated, and giving them a vehicle to actively help as well. And so again, I think the definition of luck is opportunity meets preparation. And we just happen to be in a position that we have all the puzzle pieces of a very complex problem being able to line up in a process that makes sense for the buyers, the sellers, and the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Good answer. And I think you hit on a really good point in saying that it is a complex situation of the individuals that we've brought into Canada and connected them with business owners and had that full transition. There's so much involved. I mean, it's so much involved just to get your permanent residency or PR in Canada, whether you're buying a business or getting sponsored or, whatever. The hoops to jump through just feel almost never ending. Do you want to speak about some of those hoops and how they apply to not only our international buyers, but in the context of individuals who are coming over from the Ukraine as well? From Ukraine, not the Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one of my favorite books is Venture Deals. And the reason why I really like it is because it takes you through the process of raising capital from each individual person's perspective. And so I think looking at this problem, looking at it through the lens of the person going through that process, kind of breaks it down. And so if you're an international individual that wants to a path to immigrate to Canada, one of the avenues that they can tap into is called the provincial nomination program. And so they're run by the provinces. The criteria is a little bit different. You have to qualify. One thing that's going to be super important later is called the personal net worth verification. So you have to have a certain amount of personal net worth so that you have ways of making a business thrive, some entrepreneurial experience. And it is really a 4-year process that they go through. So most provinces require that you do an exploratory trip, you tour the community, you find a business that you want to purchase, you go through the normal due diligence process on that business, make sure it's viable, make sure it can support you and your family once you arrive, and then you sign a purchase agreement with the seller. All of that gets submitted into the bureaucratic mess that is some provincial nominee programs. And I know a lot of governments are actively working to expedite that process because there is such a huge need. And then once you arrive, you're under a signed contract to help that business expand and thrive. And so, like I said before, it's about a 4-year process. And so when we were originally looking at this from this project's lens, we thought that we could potentially go through the provincial nominee program. But Cosmina, who's a partner at Fragoman, came up with a really great idea of bringing individuals through the skilled workers program. We work with buyers and sellers of many different walks of life. And again, looking at people that really do want to set up a transition that's fair for the buyer, the seller, and the community is important. And so we have some private equity groups that are purchasing cash flowing businesses and helping them expand. And in one of our customer discovery conversations, Cassie, our partners out of Toronto, talked about how there's a skilled workers shortage. And so again, by happenstance, looking at bringing people over to work in the businesses and then vesting them as employee share ownership plans just really worked well for the objectives of the capital, and then an opportunity for some of the displaced Ukrainians that want to come in and really not just survive, but also thrive in the business environment here.
Totally. And if you'll allow me, I'd just like to extract out some of the bigger hurdles that we're looking at when it comes to immigrating into Canada through one of these provincial nomineeship programs. You mentioned the personal net worth verification. That's a big one first and foremost. And then we also have Individual provinces require a minimum spend on purchasing a business, right? And then, like you said, we also have the problem of skilled workers. And I think a lot of that is because of the pandemic. Or was that like a pre-pandemic problem that we had issues with skilled workers in the country?
I think it was a pre-pandemic problem, and we can definitely unpack that further, maybe on a future YouTube live. But yeah, it's just you look at the silver tsunami of individuals that are retiring, and there's just not enough people to fill those roles, whether it's owners or skilled workers in certain sectors. So
Yeah, I
it
love
was
that
just
term, silver tsunami.
yeah, it's scary. It's almost a cute term for something that's going to hit every corner of our society. You know, I love stats, and sometimes the individual gets lost in those, but they're enormous. There's $10 trillion worth of business assets that are looking at transitioning in the next 20 years, and 49% of those are going to happen in the next 5 years. And you know, a lot of retirees or people looking at retiring soon have been devastated by this recent shock to the stock market. We have not seen the level of social and economic impact that we're going to see when these business owners go to retire and they can't sell their business. They're not going to be able to afford retirement. 89% of a small and medium-sized business owner's personal net worth is tied up into their business. And according to the California Business Brokers Association, only 10% of businesses that list with brokers actually sell. And so think about that's a devastating amount of people that thought they would be able to sell and retire that are just not going to be able to.
Yeah, totally grim numbers for sure. Yeah. Let's talk about the financial requirements to immigrate into the country. I mean, yes, we've definitely identified the issue of not having skilled workers. We know that it's the succession rate within Canada is not great. Like, you know, business owners trying to sell their businesses is just like it's a challenge. So we need more people willing to buy the businesses. But if we're talking about Ukrainians specifically who are leaving a war-torn country, oftentimes, you know, it's like half the family, right? Because the men have to stay within Ukraine. But if they're going to seek this avenue, there's a few barriers, right? Like the personal net worth being one of them. And we sort of spoke to the federal government and tried to get that policy lifted, didn't we? You were definitely more on the front end of that than I was.
Yeah, it was, you know, we went into problem solving mode and we looked at this as, okay, like what's the minimum requirements to get people, again, this is back when we were thinking about bringing people in through the provincial nominee program. And we'll talk about how that's changed. But the biggest barrier that we faced is you think about it, like you've ran a business in your home country for 10 years, and you'll probably own the commercial building. And, you know, you might have some cash in the bank that you can use for that personal net worth verification, but you're forced to leave the country. And then what's that commercial building worth when it's tied up in a war zone? And so like, even if you have the documents, how do you get a valuation on something that is in a conflict zone? Or do you even have access to, even if it was in pure cash, do you have access to that cash? And so
totally.
The biggest barrier to the provincial nominee programs, which is the reason why we abandoned that idea of the provincial nominee programs, is because it's very, very hard to verify that personal net worth. As you mentioned, we did talk to IRCC, and they supported the provincials, the Ministry of Immigrations that we spoke to, in not wanting to change that policy, and they have really good reason to. It's almost, again, one of those happenstance things as well, because provincial nominee programs, it's a very long bureaucratic process, and this is a very real need right now. And so this almost works out better for the business owner looking at selling, instead of having to wait that 18 to 24 months to even know if your business is going to get sold. This can get done within 30 to 60 days. So a normal due diligence process, because now the funding comes from people that are established in Canada, have that private equity group. And so the biggest barrier to the provincial nominee programs was that personal net worth verification. And this works out better for all parties involved.
For all parties. Yeah, exactly. And like the investment capital coming from Cassier Partners, they're a super interesting group themselves, right? And we've had one of them as part of, like, they were a guest, Chell Erickson. He was a guest on one of our first live events or podcasts here. So how did you get introduced to them? How did you meet them?
That's
not really ultimate frisbee.
That's funny. Just for everyone knows, I think my best meeting I've ever had is I was in Toronto for the Collision conference, and they're like, "Hey, you play ultimate frisbee. Do you want to come pick up for our team?" And so I got to go and play an evening of ultimate frisbee with them, and it was absolutely delightful. So, peer pressure to all the individuals that invite me to future meetings. It has to be more fun than playing ultimate frisbee, which is pretty high in my books regardless. But our introduction to them was actually really, really neat. As you're aware, we work with a lot of community partners. And one of my absolute favorite is out of the Southwest in Alberta. We did a Southwest regional project, and Bev introduced us to these young gentlemen that were moving back from a little bit of a diverse banking background in project management, coming back from New York to Alberta to set up a private equity group. And we connected probably for the first time 20 to 24 months ago. And they fell in love with the idea of employee share ownership plans. A little bit of peer pressure to the Canadian government. The US has a far superior ESOP program than Canada. And I'm hoping that changes in the very near future because of some lines in the most recent budget. But connected with them, kind of gave them a lay of the land. And they have this investment thesis that they want to invest in communities. They want to, level up socioeconomic groups. And as a capitalist at heart, I love it because I think this is truly how you help society through capitalism. And so they raised their first fund. It's just been so amazing to see how well they've executed. Their first purchase was a business in Ontario. And when they bought it, it was 34. It was an industrial paint coating business. When they bought it, it was 34 people. 18 months later, they're at 108 employees. And so being able to, change some of the systems, put some capital behind the expansion and tap into their networks. This is what we see for any of these businesses through this Ukrainian project. So from a community standpoint, these are the right people to have invested in your community because, they check off everything that someone would want to look for in a investment attraction program from an economic standpoint.
Totally. I think it's worth mentioning too that they have a firm belief that they need to work in the businesses that they purchase as well. So it's not just a blind acquisition. It's, all of them are very much invested in the people within the business and how it operates and, making sure that culture is still there, which I think is super cool. Because sometimes, I don't know, like there's almost a little fear when you talk venture capitalists, like you're just going to get bought out and then it's, the business just goes to the man. But they're looking for the smaller businesses and they want to keep that vibe, which is important to a lot of business owners when they're letting go of their business, right?
Yeah, that legacy. And to your point, I think the last meeting I was on with them, Chell had actually just worked the night shift on the line for the industrial paint coating system. And he shares my love of coffee, but I think that day he was taking it to the next level out of necessity. They really do roll up their sleeves and work side by side with the business owners that they're acquiring from, and then the employees in the long term. And they're going to be a household name 1 year, 5 years from now, just because they really do have a really strong thesis and amazing limited partners in their fund as well.
Yeah, totally. We'll stop gushing about Cassier Partners because I feel like we could spend this whole episode just gushing about them because they're pretty cool. There's other individuals that we're working with too, Skilled Jobs and Talent Beyond Boundaries, and they're also going to be important contributors. Do you want to talk about them real briefly, and then we'll get into like the actual step by step of what it's going to take to bring in Ukrainian individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we kind of talked about before, I feel like a lot of people were called to almost like a mission to help individuals. And there's a lot of different organizations working on the program silo. And so Fragoman was kind of the connector for a lot of them. And so Talent Beyond Boundaries is a really cool NGO that was started in the US. And they help displaced persons from different conflict areas find a way to immigrate through skilled workers programs. They work with a firm called Jumpstart that works directly with the refugees primarily. And they have a huge database of 42,000 people that are looking for skilled work placements around the world. And then the other company that we haven't mentioned that you just alluded to is Skilled Jobs. And so it's a marketplace for employers and employees to connect. And we've been able to integrate our systems alongside them so that when the employees are filling out the form, they're able to identify if a long-term objective of theirs is actually business ownership. And so that really is the value proposition or the summary or the soundbite for displaced Ukrainians looking at this program is it's not just a job, it's a viable career with business ownership baked into the project alongside Cassier Partners.
Yeah.
And,
so Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
And of course, Fragoman. I think this is a firm that needs no introduction. They're the world's largest immigration firm. I think they have 5,500 immigration lawyers around the world, and they've got some of the best data on immigration. And so they really have their fingers on the pulse of what's changing. And so working with Cosmina's quite lovely because she's able to use some political capital as well and connections in always making sure the client's best interest is at heart.
Yeah, I love Cosmina. She's a bit of a female powerhouse in her world, right? Like in her circles.
Oh, absolutely. I think, honestly, I think she's the most powerful woman in immigration in Canada.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a way to measure that. Maybe there is. I don't know. She would definitely surface for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if we're taking all of these partners, we're putting the pieces together, let's walk through the step-by-step of how this works. Succession matching looks for businesses, or we have an inventory of businesses looking to sell. What makes a business a good candidate for this program?
That's a really good question. I think for any business transition, the number one key thing that we should look for is the ability to do mentorship. And I think over and above in any situations, this project, being willing to mentor a person. So a lot of these people that are displaced have business experience in the Ukraine and, have run businesses before, but doing business in Canada is going to be a little bit different. And so a business owner that's going to not only help set them up professionally, but also having that community connection as well. We want people to thrive both professionally and personally in the community. And so willing to welcome the person into the community goes a long way as well. Some of the criteria that we're looking at is usually 4 employees or more. Just so that the corporate knowledge transfer, the individual buying in, it's not just them. Profitable business. I know that changes the scope a lot through the pandemic, but we want to be able to use leverage financing for part of the acquisition, and so that's going to be one of the bank requirements. And industry agnostic. I know we get that question quite a bit, and so anything from honey farms to seafood distribution would be a great fit. And location agnostic. I know we work primarily in rural communities, but in city centers, you know, a lot of places are looking at bringing people in. So location is not really a criteria. So
cool. And I'm going to try not to lead you so much here, but this is going to be obviously leading you. There's another ingredient that I am anticipating you to pepper in there, and it's a sort of readiness to sell piece.
Emotional readiness to sell.
Yeah.
So that's actually an interesting point, and we can unpack that a little bit. So a timeline to a transition, that would be an ideal seller for this, would be 1 to 5 years before they want to transition. But it's kind of nice that like this isn't going to happen overnight. So a estate sale that is trying to sell off the assets isn't a good fit. But if a business owner is thinking that in 1 to 5 years they want to retire, there might be some flexible situations and some like great tax planning avenues that they could use through this program. Using the one-time personal exemption for capital gains in Canada comes to mind. And so that timeline piece. So if someone's looking at selling in 1 to 5 years, has a realistic asking price on their business. Interestingly enough, that's usually one of the vetting criteria that we have to see if someone is actually emotionally ready to sell is that asking price. And yeah, so 1 to 5 years before they want to transition, and that will provide that mentorship period.
Amazing. And then of course, if you know the seller has all that criteria, but maybe doesn't have all the paperwork together, we also offer a program that helps to get business owners ready on a different level, right? The formal succession planning program.
Right. That is one of our criteria that us as a company are requiring. We're really fortunate enough to work with Community Futures in Manitoba and Saskatchewan on developing a formal succession plan program that we've rolled out nationally. And it's made that difference. You know, I mentioned the stat of 10% of businesses look at sell. Our thesis is 50 to 60% of businesses that sell through our platform will actually close the transition and sell because that differential proposition of going through the formal succession plan. And I had some very interesting advice from one of our board advisors a couple of months ago, and I'm going to clean up his language a little bit, but he said, Alison, no one cares about formal succession plans like you do. And so just looking at that from a different lens, from a seller's perspective, is going through this program really gives you this idea of what options are available to you as a seller. So I mentioned, you know, maybe not a good fit for this program if you weren't profitable for the next couple of years, but there are always options for individuals selling a business. So you need to arm yourself with the right information so that you can make that decision and hopefully transition the business while you're alive, because, you know, a business is going to sell, whether it's the seller selling it or the state selling it. And so we just want to arm those sellers with the best information available to them, and working with our team through that formal succession plan process is one of our internal requirements if you're looking at participating in the Ukrainian project, just because we want to mitigate the risk to the buyers and making sure it's a good fit for the seller as well. And so we've got really high hopes for this program. I know our partners are working with the federal government on bringing in 2,000 displaced Ukrainians. And the only way we're going to get there is if we can pattern match and scale this and set up a system that does work for the buyer, the seller, and the community.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you keep coming back to the buyer, seller, and community. That community piece is big, and I want to come back to. I just got the 10-minute warning, so let's just. I think we've touched on a lot of great things here. Let's move through the steps. So, you know, we have the business, we vetted them, we know that they're a good fit for this program. The next step is we sell, or we get that business to engage with Cassier partners. Correct?
That's correct. And so we do an introduction call. we collect quite a bit of the documents to verify. So just so all the sellers are aware, we understand that privacy is extremely important. So our team reviews that and then does the matching with the potential buyers. We don't disclose that information to the potential buyers until the seller is ready to do that. But we set up an introduction call and they go through the normal due diligence process with Cassier. In the I guess parallel to that, we're working with our project team partners. Like I mentioned, Jumpstart and Talent Beyond Boundaries have a humongous pool of candidates. And then we've seen an amazing uptake on skilled jobs. So if anyone's knows of any displaced Ukrainians that might be interested in this program, please sign up on skilljobs.com, SKILLD jobs.com. And no E. And fill out an application there so that we can get them into the system as we're expanding out these businesses. So once the seller and Cassier have come to a purchase agreement, finding a displaced Ukrainian that would work well in the business, and then moving them to that community. One of the things that we also didn't anticipate is there's a lot of people already in Canada that have already came. And then there's a lot of international people. So timelines kind of vary a little bit on that, but from start to finish, it could be as quickly as a 60 to 90 day process
right.
to having check on hand.
Which is fast, right? In terms of the world of succession, that's like lickety split.
That's the iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg. They have to go through the formal succession plan, which takes 3 months. So start to finish, I guess, more fairly, I should say 6 months is what a seller could anticipate.
Yeah. Which is still fast in the world of succession.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
The average in Canada is 2 to 7 years. And so we're really proud of how we've been able to, again, pattern match and expedite that process.
Totally. Yeah. And then once Cassier Partners has the business, the intent is, like you mentioned, hiring a skilled Ukrainian worker, but the whole transparency surrounding like having them eventually take over the business through a management buyout, right?
So I want to be really careful with the language there. So it's not take over the whole business. The nice thing about this program is Cassier is in it for the long haul. And so they'll be there working shoulder to shoulder with the displaced Ukrainian for 20, 30 years. They'll be a partner in that business. And so very similar to in the tech industry, it's very common, like what we're doing is vesting the employees. And so setting up a vesting option. So one of the misconceptions that we get about this program is there's actually no capital required from the displaced Ukrainian. Cassier is purchasing the business, and then they're working shoulder to shoulder with that individual over a vesting period of usually 4 years. And so that person earns the shares through working in the business. And so that way they can figure out if it's a good fit for both parties, but they'll have ownership in that business after that 4-year period, working alongside Cassier with no capital down. Yeah,
which is amazing. Yeah. I think I don't know where Canada is at in terms of refugee status for Ukrainians currently. I know that stuff is always shifting, but I personally have a friend who is a refugee from Syria. And when he was first sponsored to come into the country, he was very much set up on a path that he felt he had no autonomy in. And that was his biggest, I'm super grateful to be here. Of course, right? Thank you so much for bringing me out of the situation that I had. But, he went from owning businesses to, well, we got you this job as a dishwasher at a restaurant. And he was just like, I have so much more to offer than that. That's not the path I want to take, and there's this, I really feel like this program lends itself to giving that autonomy back to individuals who are coming from a tough situation and maybe need to feel that sense of autonomy to reground themselves and bring themselves back to life again, right?
I think that's such a powerful story. And I think your participation in this project has really been that driven by that personal connection and understanding why it's so important to just not give a handout, but also set these people up for a viable and fulfilling life. I think that's what we should all strive for in any programs that we work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great high note to end off on, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think thanks so much.
Yeah.
I guess next steps, if anyone is interested in either selling your business through this program or wants to know how to get maybe some of the displaced Ukrainians that they're hosting, please reach out to us at hello@successionmatching.com, and we'll probably put some contact information in the comment section of this video.
We will for sure. Yeah, I'll make sure to add info on all the different partners as well, and access to our landing page and all of the info in the show notes so that we can, if anybody needs info, they can reach out. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alison. I really appreciate it. And we'll be